Hello, everybody. Welcome into the cycle, part 2 of the week. We are talking some buy lows and sell highs. We're also talking some waiver ads that Maher and I think you should be looking at. Maher, let's dive right in. We will start where we always do for this section with our favorite buy lows. Who you got for us?
So my buy low for this week is Christian Walker. And it's a little concerning because he's an older player. And with an older player who's off to a really slow start, you always worry, is this more than a slow start? Is this kind of the beginning of the end? And for Christian Walker, I don't think so. I think there's still a lot of production to come. The one thing I noticed while kind of researching this is that his bat speed looks fine. So not like an obvious concern. If you were kind of looking at a player as like, maybe the end is coming, you might see like a decline in bat speed there. But his bat speed looks fine. I just think it's kind of like a new situation, new team, new ballpark, new everything, and he's just kind of like off to a slow start. And I think he's going to turn around. I think you're going to probably still end up with close to 30 home runs and an average around 250. And I think you can buy really low right now because there are, I've seen on our Discord and in the comments that people are talking about dropping Christian Walker. And so if you want to drop him, please go ahead and I'll pick him up.
So setting aside dropping him, because obviously you'll be happy to pick him up in that scenario, what would you be willing to get rid of to acquire him right now? What type of player? If you want to throw out specific names, definitely you can, but who are the types of players that you'd be looking to say, like, I will move on from this person to go get Christian Walker?
So when I wrote him up in the article, I included a few names. So how about I shoot those back at you and you tell me which player you would rather have rest of the season?
Okay.
So the first name I put was Marcus Semien. Would you rather have Marcus Semien or Christian Walker?
I'd rather have Christian Walker.
How about Bryce Miller?
We were just talking about Miller before we started recording. I really liked Miller coming into the year. I think I'd rather have Miller. But if I had a strong need at first base, which is very possible, and I had depth at pitching, then I would consider it. But I would rather in a vacuum have Miller.
How about Freddie Peralta?
I think I'd rather have Walker.
And then the last one is Bailey Ober.
I like Bailey Ober. I think I'd rather have Walker though. So I think I am buying your case of him as a buy low, given that most of those names I would agree with making that trade.
Yeah, and I tried to pair those. I looked at our fantasy baseball trade value chart and tried to pick people like in similar tiers that I thought would match up as like kind of like, fair trade offers. Would you agree that they're all kind of like in the same kind of area as like fair trade offers?
None of them stuck out to me as like this is like a disrespectful offer or anything like that. I think those are all reasonable. I think those are all trades that you would not get laughed at for making in most leagues, I would think.
Perfect. I nailed it then.
You did fine. A passing grade. All right, my favorite buy low is Gunnar Henderson, who I wanted to highlight because obviously anybody who invested in Gunnar Henderson invested quite a bit in him in draft season, so they're probably not just like looking to get out, no matter what. But I wanted to highlight what percentile. I don't know if you've looked at his StatCast page or not. I hope you haven't yet. What percentile do you think his average exit velocity is? And also just if you want to throw out a number, a guess of what you think it actually is. And he's had 43 plate appearances since coming back from the IL.
I have not looked at it, but since you're asking, it feels like a trick. Unless you want me to think it's a trick, in which case it's not a trick.
Reverse psychology.
Yeah, let's go with 88th percentile exit velocity.
His average exit velocity is 99.3 miles per hour. It is 100th percentile in baseball. His hard hit rate is also 100th percentile, 69.2% hard hit rate. Bat speed is its typical very high. Interestingly, some of his StatCast page is either blue or red. There's not a lot of kind of gray area middle ground. So like his barrel rate and his sweet spot rate are actually fairly low. He's striking out a ton. That's not going to last, though. His strikeout rate's 37.2%. His career high before this was his rookie season at 25.8%. That's going to come down. The walk rate is a career low. That's going to come up. And he is hitting the absolute crap out of the ball. I'm telling you, Maher, again, as somebody who watches every Orioles game, every single night it feels like he has one or two at bats where he hits an absolute missile right at a fielder's glove, and it is crazy how much it's happened. Right now, his batting average is 214. His OPS is 543. He has not hit a home run yet. He has 2 stolen bases despite not getting on base that often. His OBP is 233. Those numbers are all going to go up, and I put him in this segment to say Gunnar Henderson, before this injury and stretch, was borderline unattainable in most leagues. I think he is still going to cost a pretty penny, but he might actually be attainable with this very slow start if somebody's kind of in feeling early desperation mode, or they're like, listen, I just want to get out from the Gunnar Henderson business. I'm worried. Last year was not an outlier for him, but it's not like he has the longest track record of major league success yet. This early in his career, he's still only 23 years old. I'm putting him here to say 0% concerned. Those hits are going to start falling. He's hitting the ball too hard for them not to. I think his numbers are going to look worse than they were last year by the end of the season because he's had this slow start, I expect. But his pace, there will come a moment soon where that luck is going to flip, and his pace is going to look just like it did last year, a borderline 40-20 pace, which is what he was close to last year. I would trade good players. I would trade borderline studs if I thought I could get Gunnar Henderson in return.
All right, I'll try to see where your breaking point is. The one thing about him, which I think you're right, his swinging, not only is he striking out a ton, his swinging strike rate is way up. It's at over 15%. It was below 10% last year. So he just has to start
the other thing
hitting
I'll quickly say on that too is, like, remember, he didn't play in the last however many weeks of spring because of this injury. So, like, this really is his spring, just getting that timing down. Like, we kind of roll our eyes at spring training stats and stuff, but the actual act of getting those at-bats is important. So I'm, like, keeping that in mind, even aside from the fact that some of the underlying numbers are still not just better than we've shown, but like among the best in baseball.
So how good of a player are we talking? Would you trade Bryce Harper?
Yes, I would trade Bryce Harper for Gunnar.
Okay.
Ignoring positional scarcity type questions.
Yeah. All right, let's try some. I like to do a lot of like pitcher for hitter trades. Because a lot of times I think in reality, like, I either have pitching or need pitching, or have hitting or need hitting, so I'm flipping one for the other. How about Garrett Crochet?
Man, that's an interesting one. So when you said pitcher, there are a couple names that I was like, definitely I would not trade, and that's Skubal and Skeens. And then there was like, I think Wheeler, like anybody after Crochet, I definitely would. Wheeler and Crochet were the two where I'm like, I would think about it. I probably wouldn't trade Wheeler. Crochet. Crochet's a really good one to throw out because I think he could finish his SP1 this year, and my jaw wouldn't be on the floor, and I wouldn't want to give up that guy for Gunnar. But I think in a vacuum, I would like, if we were drafting today, I would draft Gunnar ahead of Crochet. So I think I have to say yes.
Okay. So that seems like that's where the line is. I was going to keep going, but like Logan Gilbert,
on the pitcher side, that is the line. Anybody after Crochet, I would trade for Gunnar. I will say right now, there's no name you can throw out that I mean, like, I guess Strider maybe, but that's like a question of how much you believe in the health. So like, setting that aside, there's no pitcher I wouldn't trade for Gunnar besides those top 4, maybe 5 guys.
Did you have Gunnar? You probably did. Gunnar ahead of Lindor coming into the year?
I did have him ahead coming into the year, and I would still have him ahead.
What about Vlad? Again, ignoring positional.
Yeah, ignoring positional. That's like a very close one. I would rather have Gunnar because of the steals going forward. And I expect the power numbers to be largely similar once Gunnar gets going.
How about Kyle Tucker?
Tucker, I'd probably rather have Tucker. Here's an interesting one. And we don't have to like just throw out every single name, but here's an interesting one.
How about everybody?
Yeah. I could solve this by saying where he's ranked. No, I was going to say an interesting one for me would be Churio, because I was extremely high on him coming into the year. He was going like round and a half later than Gunnar in drafts. He's been good. He's going to give you both power and speed like I expect Gunnar to do. He is an interesting one. I would probably trade Jackson Churio for Gunnar Henderson today, though, if I could. But that one would be like a very close one in terms of how I view them rest of season.
I have Gunnar at 11 and Churio at 15.
So you would also make that deal then?
Yep.
Yeah. And anyways, I don't need to tell people Gunnar's good. I'm just telling you that don't be afraid of this really, really poor start. The good times are coming soon. I can promise you that. All right, let's go to our sell highs. Who do you got?
So my sell high is Michael Busch, and it's because I kind of like Michael Busch, but he's off to a really strong start. I'm not sure what his value is, but I think it's probably near its peak right now. He's batting cleanup in that lineup every day, which is great to see. Off to a strong start with some power. Still not really hitting lefties that great, which is interesting because I wrote him up in our buy low sell high article on the site. And the interesting thing is that he actually had a decent batting average against lefties last year, but only one home run last year against lefties. The other 20 were all against righties. And this year he's got really poor numbers against lefties. And I kind of think we're going to continue to see him not in the lineup against lefties on a pretty regular basis, which kind of takes away some of his value, especially you think about, if you're in a daily league, fine, you can kind of flip him in and out of your lineup and get most of his stats. But if I'm in a weekly lineup league where I have to kind of, set it, what if I'm facing 2 or 3 lefties that week, or Michael Busch is facing 2 or 3 lefties that week? Can you just stick him in your lineup for, 3 or 4 games? He's batting .284 right now with 4 home runs. Like I said, already hitting in the middle of that order. And I think I would try to flip him. And some of the names I included, I'll flip it back to you because I wrote a bunch of names. And I actually was workshopping this with Kelly because not only is she a really good analyst, but she's also a Cubs fan. So I was like, tell me if I'm in the right ballpark here for like a Michael Busch trade. Because like, am I overvaluing, undervaluing him? And these are the names I landed on. So would you rather have Michael Busch or Brandon Pfaadt rest of season?
I'd rather have Pfaadt.
How about Mackenzie Gore?
I'd rather have Gore.
Clay Holmes?
Honestly, depends on the format. I'm pretty skeptical of him. I was really high on Holmes in draft season. I'm pretty skeptical of him going deep enough into games to be super valuable in more points formats. But I think he will be good the innings he pitches. So for me, that's format dependent. I think I would probably rather have Holmes than.
However, in point formats, he is also a spark, which can be helpful, and especially if it's like a 2-start week, unless he gets minus 17 points like Tanner Hack did.
Yeah.
A pitcher off to a slow start. You say Kikuchi?
I think I'd rather have Busch. But I don't think that's like off on the range.
And then the one hitter I included was Taylor Ward. I want to trade for Taylor Ward if I can.
I think I'd probably rather have Busch, but I wouldn't argue strongly that you're wrong if you prefer Ward.
Well, there you go. That's my sell high. I just think he's off to a really strong start, and like I said, like the value was kind of like at its peak. Because like I rostered Michael Busch a bunch last year, and there were just stretches where I couldn't use him, and I had to he was like on and off my roster, and even though I think he's probably a little bit better this year, and obviously the Cubs are buying in, they're batting him cleanup every day. I just think the lefties thing is going to continue to be a problem unless he really improves in that area, and I don't know that he's going to, at least not this year.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. We'll go to my sell high. The only pitcher on our buy low sell high segment so far today, I got Kevin Gausman, and he has pitched well, but I wonder if I was somebody who was saying I think he could be a nice bounce back this year. It looked like the velocity was back up in spring, and he was somebody I was interested in investing in. And so I wonder if other folks who had that same approach and did draft him are sitting here saying his ERA is 2.49. His WHIP is 0.71. Gausman's back. The strikeouts are not there. 20 strikeouts in 25 1/3 innings, and a lot of the strikeouts came. Literally half of them came. Is that literally half? Am I doing my math right? Yes, literally half. I was like looking at a different number. Half of them came in the excellent start that he had against the Red Sox. It was a superb start. Not taking that away from him. The rest of his season has been good, like very startable, but not some elite ace. And if you think there's anybody in your league who's looking at this as like Kevin Gausman is kind of back and expecting the era where I mean, prior to last season, he had 3 straight years of 200 plus strikeouts. If you can trade him as a guy that people are expecting that out of, you should do that because you're not going to get that this year. I feel very strongly about that. His FIP is a lot higher than what his ERA is now. It's 3.84 compared to that ERA of 2.49. I think Kevin Gausman is a good pitcher, so it's not like I'm saying dump him at any cost. But if you can get somebody to trade for him as, like, not an ace, nobody thinks he's an ace, but as maybe a better pitcher than he is, especially given that I'm worried about those strikeouts, then I would be willing to make that move. Like, not to mention the fact that he's in his mid-30s now. Like, you never know with injuries and how he'll last throughout the season. When you get up to that age, but I think that whip's going up. I mean, it's definitely going to go up. It's not going to stay at 0.71. I think that ERA is definitely going to finish in the 3s, not the 2s. And I think he's going to be not a lot under, but under a strikeout per inning by the time we get to the end of the season. And all that added up, if you find somebody who's more of a believer than me, I think you make that deal.
Yeah, his like you mentioned, his FIP is 3.84, xFIP 3.88, Sierra 3.75, xERA 3.33. It's interesting that his K per 9 is down from 8.06 to 7.11. His K percentage is actually slightly up. It was 21.4% last year. It's sitting at 22% this year, so it's kind of hard.
But still well down from 2023 and before.
Oh yeah, big time.
Because he had that stretch where it was like. Starting in 2019, his K rate was 25%. I'm not going to read the decimals, but about 25%, 32%, 29%, 28%, 31%. Then last year dropped all the way down to 21, and then 22 so far this year.
Yeah. Well, even looking at like 2023 and 2024, like side by side, it's kind of a drastic drop because he threw like the same amount of innings, 185 versus 181, but in one of those years he struck out 237, and the next one 162. So a massive difference despite the innings being almost identical.
Yeah. So I like Gausman. I actually have him in a number of leagues, but I'm trying to sell high, not sell, but sell high if I can. I like that.
I like that you wrote up 2 players for our article for this week, and then chose 2 different players for this segment.
Well, the article, the players I wrote up in the article, which everybody should go check out, FantasyPros.com, were players I picked last week on the show. That still, when it came time to write the article, I hadn't really started prepping for this week yet. And so rather than do that, I was like, everything I said on the show last week still applies. So I'm just going to put Brent Rooker again. Who was a pitcher? Oh, I put Lodolo, right? Yeah.
Lodolo, yeah.
Yeah, and we talked about those guys last week, so I wanted to mix it up. But yes, I did. That thought did cross my mind. If you are struggling with lineup decisions, our lineup assistant recommends optimal lineup suggestions to maximize your team's performance each day or week. Just sync your league for tailored guidance based on your roster and league settings. Download the Fantasy Baseball My Playbook app or visit fantasypros.com/MLB My Playbook to set your winning lineup today. Let's get to waivers central. Who is your favorite hitter?
So my favorite hitter, I went pretty deep this week. I haven't always gone the deepest in previous weeks. This one I would argue is pretty deep. Chase Meidroth, who I think is a pretty good hitter, pretty good contact hitter. Who, like, maybe not the most power, maybe not the most speed. I just think he's a really good hitter. And the note I wanted to add when I was writing it up this morning is that today he's batting leadoff. Obviously not the best lineup. He's on the White Sox, but still, he was kind of like, he came up, he was batting like 7th, 6th, 5th, 5th, leadoff. And so there's value, especially for a player like him who's just going to get on base. He's actually the one, ironically, who broke up the Garrett Crochet no-hitter the other day, ironically because he was one of the big pieces in that Garrett Crochet trade. And so he's the one who broke up the no-hitter. And so far he's batting 286. Again, no home runs, no steals. In 122 games in the minors in 2024, 7 home runs, 13 steals, but a 293 average. So I think he's a guy who's going to get on base. He's going to run a little bit when the weather gets warmer. He might, I think his ceiling is probably 10 home runs, 15 stolen bases, and even that might be a little optimistic. But if he's batting leadoff, he can give you a nice little batting average boost, and he might score some runs, even though it's a bad lineup. And I'm in a bunch of leagues where I can use some batting average, and I can use a player who just, like we've mentioned a bunch of players who are off to slow starts. He's someone who's hitting now, and who I think, I would like to add, because he's just got really good like plate discipline, bat to ball. Like his walk rate is usually like much higher than his strikeout rate, which you don't see a lot of. So just like a really like solid, great plan at the plate hitter.
I think this is a good call. I don't really have any pushback on this one. And like you said, kind of super available. Kind of looking deeper. So yeah, I don't have anything to disagree with you on. I went a little deeper as well. I went Jake Mangum. I'm pronouncing that right? You always catch me on pronunciation.
I believe so.
I
always read it as Magnum, so I always have to
I kind of caught myself there. Yeah. At any rate, this is like strictly a stolen bases play and batting average, I think, to a degree, but clearly not somebody you're ever going to get any power out of. He does not have a single barrel on the season. It's literally barrel percentage is 0. But despite that, he's batting .327. He has 7 stolen bases already. His on-base percentage is over .350. I think this is largely who he is as a player. So if you can afford a guy who's not going to hit a single home run this season, his launch angle is negatives on the season right now. Like this is the type of player he is. He doesn't walk a ton, but he also basically never strikes out, and he is so fast. I really expect, like, his batting average on balls in play this year is .364. That's very in line with what it was in the minors. Like, this is somebody who, with his speed and the fact that he doesn't strike out, I think can sustain quality batting averages even without, barreling up the ball every time out there and having kind of the StatCast page that would make you think the batting average is going to be high. I think he's one of those outlier types, just given that he doesn't strike out and is a 90th percentile sprint speed type of a guy. And every time he's on base, you're expecting a stolen base. I don't think he's been caught yet this year. If he has, then I missed that. I don't know that he's going to get a ton of playing time the whole season. He could get market corrected by Chandler Simpson at some point. But for now, if you need stolen bases, take advantage. This is not a pick him up to be a league winner the rest of the way. This is pick him up, get some batting average, get some steals out of him, and then be willing to drop him when the time comes.
He's also 29 years old, making, I believe, his MLB debut this season at 29 years old. So shout out to him for sticking with it. This feels like a Rays player, just like a guy with a specific skill set that they were just like, this fits. This broken toy fits perfectly with what we got going on down here. And maybe, who knows, at that Steinbrenner Field, maybe he might sneak out of a few home runs down there in the summer if he's still in the lineup. Like you said, it's a short-term play. Who knows how long he's going to be in the lineup, but 7 stolen bases is 7 stolen bases, and those count forever.
If you're in any league that stolen bases matter, which most leagues do, he will get you the stolen bases. And I think be a good batting average guy too. You mentioned that you need batting average in a lot of places. Like I think he will help you there too, even if not to the same degree as the steals. All right, let's look at our favorite pitchers. Who do you have?
So it was tough this week. It was tough to find a pitcher. I had to dig pretty deep, and I was going to go with Tyler Mahle, but I figured someone we already talked about a little bit last week. His roster percentage is probably already creeping up in your leagues, depending on when waivers run. So I decided to go a little bit deeper with a pitcher who is off to a strong start, Jose Quintana. Not the sexiest name out there. It's kind of been around forever. He's in his mid-30s, never had the best stuff. Just kind of a guy, but
you're really selling him.
I know, but here's the thing: he's off to a strong start. I believe he's lined up to be a 2-star pitcher this week, unless I have that wrong.
I think you're right about that. I think
yeah.
That's right.
So he's lined up to be a 2-star pitcher this week, so a great streaming option, and he's just off to a really good start for a Brewers team that really needs pitching.
At the Giants, at the Cardinals.
Yeah, so not terrible. Giants ballpark is fine. Cardinals are off to a good start, so that could be a tougher one. But And if you need pitching and you need a streamer, he's a pretty good option on the waiver wire. And let me tell you, I spent a lot of time on this because I was trying to find someone better than Jose Quintana, and I couldn't. At least not someone who's likely to be available. He's 15% Yahoo, 9% ESPN, 26% CBS. And yeah, like he's probably not someone you're going to keep for, the whole season. But if you need a streamer for this week, Jose Quintana's got 2 starts coming his way. And he's got, so far, a 0.71 ERA, although his expected numbers are multiple runs higher than that.
It's funny that you looked at the available pitchers and thought, well, there's not a lot of good options, so maybe this guy could be a streamer. I did the exact opposite. I looked at the pitchers and said, well, there's not a lot of good options, so let's pick up somebody that I think could be good later in the season. So I went with Chase Dollander. He is basically the same roster percentages as Jose Quintana, except for on CBS, he's twice as rostered, but Yahoo and ESPN, he's basically identical to your pick. And he is obviously like a high-level prospect with the Rockies. I know a pitcher with the Rockies is not the most exciting, but his strength as a pitcher
quite the opposite, actually.
Yes, but his strength as a pitcher is the fastball velocity, which I do think plays a little better in Colorado than maybe guys who rely on more like breaking ball and like movement pitches. So, it will be an obstacle for him to overcome throughout his career anytime he's pitching a home game. But I think he's a really talented prospect. I believe he was inside the top 25 on MLB Pipeline coming into the season. I didn't really expect him actually to make his debut as early as he did this year, and he already has 13 strikeouts in 10 2/3 innings. The ERA is over 5. The WHIP is over. It's 122. Like, I'm not saying that you pick him up and start starting him right away. I think the strikeout upside is very legitimate, though. And I think as he adjusts to the big leagues, he will do a better job of keeping the ball in the ballpark, which has been a struggle for him so far to start the year. And I think he'll be a playable pitcher by the second half of the season, with more upside beyond that. So, like I said, you took kind of the short-term view with there not being a lot of good options. I took the long-term view with there not being a lot of good options and said, if you have the ability to have a pitcher on your roster that you're not really looking to start right away, but that you can hold on to, I think there's real upside going forward, especially if you need strikeouts. I think that's going to be the category he helps you most in. What do you make of, I mean, it's only been 2 starts, but what we've seen so far out of Dollander?
I mean, there's a lot to like. It's just, the elephant in the room that you already mentioned is that it's, Colorado, Coors Field, which I think.
But if you're not sorry to cut you off, but if you're not starting him every week anyway, like your expectation is not, then you could just save him for the away starts if that is enough of a concern for you. Like if you're already you're not viewing him as an every week starter, then, I'm not sure how much that matters, like if you're picking and choosing your spots with him.
Yeah, he's a guy who has like great to elite like stuff. Like if you want to talk about like the stuff plus model, he has like really good stuff. He grades out really well there. Really strong track record in the minors coming up. It's just like I can't get that Colorado stink off my mind when talking about pitchers, which like I honestly, this is a bigger conversation. I think it's a real problem with like, obviously like Coors Field has been around like forever and it's not going away, but it's not just like the way the ball flies there. Like the ball with pitchers like just doesn't move the same. And so like you have to like learn how to pitch in Coors Field because like your slider doesn't move and your curveball doesn't.
That's why I mentioned the fastball velocity is such a strong thing for him, possibly translating a little bit better in Colorado.
Yeah, that's the scary part. Other than that, if we're talking about him like on the Pirates or like some other like neutral location, I would be excited about him. It's just the Colorado stuff is tough. But yeah, if you're kind of like,
I wonder. I haven't looked actually in recent years, so I wonder if this is still true. But I know at one point some of the thought about Coors was like, it's such a big outfield that it's actually more of a better like doubles and triples park than home runs necessarily. Like obviously the ball still does travel. I wonder, because home runs have been a problem for him in his first 2 starts. He's given up 4 of them already. I wonder if the home games almost maybe play a little to his favor with the outfield being as big as it is in Coors. That would require me to look into it a little more. I don't want to speak too out of hand there.
Well, I pulled it up real quick, so let's take a look. If we're just talking about, I just pulled up the Park Factors leaderboard on StatCast. Number 1, the Rockies, Coors Field. But if we're going by just home runs, they are 107, which is above average. 100 is average. And which puts them in the top 9. So they're like not the
Okay.
most, and this is over the last 3 years. So they're still like top 10 home
So I'm
runs.
right that it's not to the same degree as some of the other stuff with the park factor, but it is still an issue.
Also, triples off the chart, 203, number 1.
Yeah, that's always
Number 1
been
for
they're
triples.
like the triples. It's crazy. I've seen so many triples live, like relative to how common of an occurrence it is in a baseball game. And not just since moving to Denver, like even at other scenarios, my buddy and I, we were like trying to count one time. Like every time we go to a game, it seems like we see a triple. That has gone up since going to Rockies games living out here. But yeah, I see a lot of triples.
We're also number 2 in doubles. Can you name the park that's number 1 in doubles?
My first guess is Fenway, just with
Correct.
the weird dimensions.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I don't have a second guess if it's not Fenway.
Yeah. A lot of people think Fenway is like a big home run park. It's not. It's a below average home run park. It's a doubles park.
Well, directly down the line is easy, but the rest of it is like a pretty deep outfield or the monster. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Or the monster or like straightaway center to like right center is 420.
huge. Yeah.
Straightaway
like a,
right field is 380.
But like
Straightaway right field.
that's not right down the line. The right down the line.
No. I'm talking about like straight, like where
Yes,
the right fielder
yes.
plays is 380. Down the line
Yes.
is like
literally
110.
outside of down the line, that whole park is difficult to hit home.
Well, it goes like because it's like round. Like after the
Yeah.
pole, it goes like straight back.
Yeah. So, yeah, interesting.
You want to hit some deep league targets for?
I was gonna say I lost my train of thought. Yeah, we'll dive back into quickly run through the deep league targets.
So we mentioned already for favorite hitters for waivers: Chase Meidroth, Jake Mangum, and then pitchers: Jose Quintana, Chase Dollander. Some deep league targets if you need some of these: Pavin Smith, who's been off to a hot start as a hitter. Again, these probably aren't guys you're going to roster forever, but if you need help in deeper leagues. Nick Martinez is an interesting one. He's off to a rough start. He has a 2-start week coming up. However, one of those 2 starts is at Colorado. The first one is against Miami. Very favorable spot for him to bounce back.
And
He's probably
is
been dropped
Colorado a
little
tough park to pitch in? Pull up the park factor.
bit. I believe it is. Mike Yastrzemski is a guy I mentioned last week. Still available. Still hitting really well.
Yeah.
Cameron Meisner, another one of the 800 players that the Rays have that are available, just producing for them right now. Matt Mervis is off to a strong start, and then Tyler Anderson, who's had some good recent years, is off to another pretty good start. So if you need another pitching option, Tyler Anderson should be available for you.
All right, we got to wrap up there because we went a little long in this segment. If you missed our first segment, Rounding the Bases, go ahead and check that out on your feeds or on YouTube. And be sure to stick around for our pitching streamers and 2-start pitcher competition as we preview the week ahead on the mound for Maher. I'm Ryan Wormeli. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next episode.